The hardest thing for me about prison wasn't about the food, the conditions, none of that. It was the way that I was treated.
Absolutely.
The way that I was looked at. When I would be walking in cuffs to medical or something, and I would say, hey, how are you doing this morning? How are you doing? And you would just be ignored or looked at like you're a piece of shit. That feeling over and over for years and years,
Absolutely.
it does something to your soul.
Absolutely.
I would rather live in worse conditions and be treated like a human by the people there that really want to see me thrive and get out than live and have a 13-inch TV in my cell and be treated like crap every day by correctional guards. That's how strong that feeling is.
You just want to be treated as a human being. You're opening that door. You're walking with an open heart.
Yeah.
And you're protecting your soul from the dehumanizing treatment, right? That can cause a person to become bitter. You protect your soul from that so that you don't become bitter, that you become better. And you realize that that's not anything that you did. It's actually something that they did. It's something that they have to carry. Don't you carry that burden.
Bruce, I always start my podcast off with like a quote or saying or question, and I was coming over here on a cab from my hotel and thinking about what I was going to ask, because there's so many things I want to ask you, but one particular thing stood out to me. It's something that you said, and then also I kind of framed a question around it. So I have it here. You've said, and I've listened to you on the Joe Rogan podcast and I've read about you and everything, and you said something along the lines of, you made a conscious decision not to serve time, but to have time serve you. Can you share what that mindset looked like day to day and how you maintained it through nearly 30 years of wrongful incarceration?
That's a good question, and it's not. It wasn't easy.
Yeah,
I would say that it was a tough task because of what you're surrounded by. But once you change your mind, you change your life. And I was always a reader, so I would always bury myself in books. And I realized that I didn't gravitate to novels. I gravitated to self-help books more than anything, and autobiographies. I kind of felt like I had to live vicariously through some people that were doing some of the things that I envisioned myself doing, even as a young person, or something that I wanted to do when I got out. Because getting out was always at the forefront of my mind, right? That was always the goal. But for me, when you wake up into an environment like prison that seeks to dehumanize you, the very core of who you are, if you don't learn to protect your soul in a very meaningful, intentional way, I mean day to day, you can find yourself in some really precarious situations. You can find yourself in deep, deep depression, and you can lose your mind, right? I mean, I've watched men literally lose their mind because they didn't protect their soul, because they saw their circumstances as defining who they were, and the judge said, okay, you have 25 to life. In my case, he said you had 37 and a half to life, so you have to do this time, right? And people say, don't do the time, right? Don't let the time do you, do the time. And I said, that didn't really make sense to me. Time is our most valuable commodity, right?
Yeah.
Time is priceless. It's something you can't buy back, something you can't purchase. When you think of someone living their last days of life, oftentimes the one thing they'll say is, I wish I had more time.
Yep.
I wish I had more time to do this differently, or to love differently, or to appreciate life differently. Time is the only thing that they ask for. They never ask for any money. They never ask for any stuff, right? Material things. They always ask for time, right? So time is so precious. When you are convicted of a crime, what they take from you is time, right? The most precious thing is time. They say, you're going to give the state this amount of time, right? So when you begin to really understand how valuable time is, and trust me, time is really an illusion. No one actually has time. We always say, well, I don't have the time to do this. No one possesses time. Time just exists within itself. So when you really begin to think about it and say, well, they want me to do time. They sentence me to this. This is what they expect of me. to languish behind prison bars, doing prison things, whether it's gangbanging, doing the same things in the street that I was doing, maybe as a young person, as a kid, just engaging with the wrong crowd. This is what they expect, right? Because prison doesn't change you, right? It's actually up to you to change yourself. And so I began to ponder these questions, right? As I dive into my reading, I began to ponder, what does it mean to serve time? And I said, I'm not going to serve time. I'm going to have time serve me. I'm going to be the master of my fate. I'm going to be the captain of my ship, right? And I'm going to have time serve me. Yeah. And in doing that, what that meant for me was I'm going to have a goal. I'm going to have a short-term goal. I'm going to have a long-term goal. I'm going to schedule my day where I spend time on my vision board. I spend time digesting mental food, spiritual food, to nurture myself, right? So I begin to just read particular types of reading, engaging in particular types of conversation, since having the foresight to develop programs like Civic Duty Initiative and say, well, this is what we're going to do. We're not in the community, but we're an extension. Incarcerated people are an extension of their respective communities. Yeah. So how do we connect back to the community, right, and transcend these concrete walls and these prison bars? And that's what it meant for me to have time serve me, to spend each day that I had to be behind prison bars for a crime I didn't commit, to spend each day learning, studying, learning about myself, growing spiritually, growing emotionally, growing mentally, and just changing the way that I thought about my entire environment.
Yeah. It's like turning pain into purpose, and I was in prison in California, and even across the country, that same thing you said, that same perspective of not allowing the time basically to overcome you, but let it serve you, in a sense. That same way, it just said differently out there. Was the same perspective out there for people that were in prison with me that I learned when I first went in. So when I heard you say that, I was like, wow, like here we are, a whole different place in the United States of America, but there's people that have that same mindset, and
absolutely,
and same, you like the same mindset that helped me and many other brothers in there get through that time, was that same thing, right? And you said that in prison is an extension of the community. You're absolutely right. And once we start to formulate groups as well, we found like purpose in our pain, like even just getting up every day, going on the yard, not sure what's going to happen next, if we're going to get out, but we knew like every day we were just focused on doing something good amongst the community. And that's a powerful way to deal with adversity, right? Is
Absolutely.
To find some purpose. And so I know one of the questions that people often ask me, and I know they probably ask you too, is like, how do you, especially in your situation, how do you do almost 30 years in prison for something that you didn't do, and maintain this sense of like humbleness and gratefulness, and just like you're not bitter, you're not angry, you're not like just bringing all that negative energy into the world. You're actually doing amazing work. Like, how do you get to there? Like, how do you have that mindset?
Thank you. I think for me, that began with gratitude. Each day being grateful for what you have, and not being concerned about what you don't have, because all you have is enough. You're enough. And understanding that you're not defined by your circumstances, you're not defined by material things, you're defined by your humanity, being connected to the humanity of others, right? And I think until we fully understand that, we won't allow that bitterness to seep in. Where you are in life, you're there for a purpose and for a reason. I hear a lot of people say the phrase pain to purpose now, as you just mentioned. And to be quite honest with you, I wrote a reality show treatment 15 years ago called Pain to Purpose. Because I wanted to take people like ourselves who have experienced pain, but has transformed it into some level of purpose. Because people need you wherever you are, right?
Yeah.
And you just got to be able to not just show up, but you have to show up with an open heart, right? And when you live in such a way with an open heart, then goodness can come in and goodness can be released. And I don't want you to mistake it and think that, challenges and negativity isn't going to come, because people are going to misuse you. People are going to take your friendship for granted, especially when you live your life with an open heart. But you can't let their badness cause you to become bitter. You have to understand that, things just don't happen to you, they happen for you. Whether it's to learn a lesson, whether it's to open up your eyes, whether it's to grant you some level of wisdom going forth. And then for me, it was all about seeking my relationship with God. I would always seek God's face, right? So during my prayer moments, I would always think about and question God about giving me a meaningful life. Because it ain't just about being alive. It's about living and thriving, right? I know in some of the spaces that we come from, we have that sixth sense. I like to tell people we can detect BS a mile away, because we've lived in environments where we've had to survive, right? That was our everyday life, was about surviving, right? And no one ever told us that we deserve to thrive. Yeah. You see, and until we begin to look ourselves in the mirror, seek the face of God, and really begin to truly love ourselves, then we understand that we deserve to thrive too. And wherever we are doesn't define who we are or what we can become. So I can become a wounded healer being in the position that I'm in, right? Being incarcerated. I can become a wounded healer. I can still help someone and have an impact on someone else's life. And that, for me, it brings so much internal joy, right? It brings a sense of purpose into your life that money just can't buy, that things just can't compensate for. You know what I mean? When you're able to pour into somebody else and they say, yo, you inspire me. Yeah. Or you helped me get my GED, or you helped me get out of a gang. Yeah. Or leave the Bloods and say, listen, I don't want to be a gang member anymore. Yeah. You know what I mean? And then you hear guys say things like, yo, we don't really talk, but I've always watched how you move. I've had guys tell me that 10, 15 years into my bid. 10, 15 years into my bid, when guys would frown upon the guys that were going to college and pursuing higher education. That wasn't the cool thing to do, right? It was guys like myself and a group called Voices from Within, as well as Resurrection Study Group that was with me when I first started my bid. These guys made it cool to pursue higher education. And and these guys were well-respected old-timers. Yeah. Right? So they made it cool for you to say, well, I'm going to go to college, man, or I'm going to go to this history group, or I'm going to go sit with my brothers and meditate in the Buddhist class, and just to get to know some of my indigenous brothers that are there. You know what I mean? Or I'm just going to continue to learn and build community, because behind prison bars is a community. Yeah. Right? It's not just prison. You don't have to become what they say you are, because they shave you down and take all the hair off your body and label you a number. Yeah. Right? Once you realize that you're more than that number. Yeah. And that you can still build community, you can still build real bonds. Life takes on a different meaning for you. Right? Yeah. And waking up every day with gratitude, being grateful for another day despite where you are. Yeah. Right? So everything, I always end my letters with oceans of gratitude, because the depths of my gratefulness cannot really be described. It cannot really be, I can't really, express to a person how grateful I am for the life that I have. Yeah. Despite the challenges, I'm still here. Yeah. Right? We know a lot of, including yourself, a lot of guys we grew up with that are no longer here. A lot of guys we left behind that are still in the muck, in the mire, still in the mud, still gangbanging or doing what they're doing, right? Yeah. We're here and we're free now. And we're able to have this conversation and have this dialogue. And hopefully it'll, trigger something to pour into somebody that's behind bars. Hopefully they'll get an opportunity to hear this, and learn. And that's what life is about, because I've watched my father pull as he climbed my entire life. So we got to pull each other up, because at the end of the day, that's what humanity calls for, right? Yeah. We're not just here to just exist. We're here to have a meaningful existence and to thrive.
One of the things I asked yesterday when I was at Children's Aid, speaking to the kids there, many of them in the foster system, the organization is there to support them and help them. And first thing I did when I started speaking to them was I asked them all a question on what they were thankful for that day, and every single one of them had an answer to it. And I was like, I mean, if you could get up in the morning and just refer to that, what you're grateful for, right? What you're thankful for every day, that helps. That sets the tone for the day. And in prison, I used to sit in my bunk. I open my eyes, and when they come and open the bar lock, and the noise is starting to make, you got to start the day. I used to I lay in my bunk and literally just like ask God for something to be thankful for today, and it would come to me, something, and it would get me up. It would move me, to keep going.
That's right.
And I know like that's so important in a place like that. And now, right, when we get up and we're like in a bed now and it's soft and all these great things, it's like, man, like we're blessed, to be where we're at, man. And,
that's right.
And you, like, you've been out how long now?
2 years now.
2 years.
29 years.
For 29 years, that's insane. It's like, and you've already like inspiring people and touching people around the world. I mean, I met you when I was in California. You were in New York. We didn't meet physically, but through a call, through social media, and your story is already inspiring people far beyond here. So I know like you're out here to do amazing work, and really truly honored to be here with you today. Honestly, I wanted to mention that in the beginning, just the gratitude that I have for today to be here with you.
Thank you, man.
Because you're inspiring me and so many others everywhere.
And the feeling is mutual, brother. Yeah. It really is mutual. I got a call yesterday I got a text yesterday about your presentation. Yeah. That people loved, not just the kids, but the adults. Yeah. That we appreciate. Yeah. What he did and when he came by and what he had to share. Yeah. And that's what it's about. You're pouring into young people, right? Oftentimes, these are those that are on the margins of society that people have overlooked, right? Because they were born under certain circumstances. See, we can't determine when we're born or the conditions that we were born into, right? Our job is to reimagine, right, what that would look like. Because, see, some people can't imagine a world without prisons because we were born in a time when prison existed. But prisons are relatively new, right? A couple hundred years, right? From Europe to America, right? And they're relatively new. So we got to be able to reimagine what a world looks like without that. Reimagine what a world looks like without abject poverty, without our young people being set aside because they don't have the means, right? Without colonialism that has taken place on the continent and several other places. So how do we reimagine what life would look like for ourselves and for those around us? And if we don't have that imagination, see, oftentimes people don't realize that historically through the annihilation, the genocide of indigenous people, through the African Holocaust, through the enslavement of black people, oftentimes we were robbed of the ability to imagine. We were robbed of the ability to have an imagination because we were taken from what we knew, and our language was taken from us, and we were forced to learn a different way of life. But we got to be able to reimagine, and sometimes that means deep reflection, introspection. The journey, the toughest journey for me throughout my incarceration wasn't the prison bars and all that. Right? It wasn't. I've always been able to hold my own. I've always been a stand-up guy, right? The toughest journey was the journey within. Those thousands of nights crying myself to sleep and thinking for hours in the midnight hour. Our old timer taught me the word. He said, "You over there lucubrating," right? I said, "What you mean by that?" He said, "You mean you're burning oil in the midnight. You're over there burning oil and you're studying and you're reading." I said, "Yeah," and I'm reflecting. And I'm reflecting on how do I change the man, right, and overcome the circumstances. Because we all have the potential to do it. It just takes some real soul searching, right? It takes some real deep introspection and reflection and looking in that mirror every day. I used to have a mirror behind my locker that I used to look in every morning and say, "I love you. Be strong." King David had to encourage himself in the Lord, right? Yeah. So I learned through reading the scriptures that sometimes the guy next door to you might be banging. He ain't got time to be encouraging nobody, right? He's ready to go to the yard and stab somebody. The guy on the other side of you might be doing the same thing. You have to learn to encourage yourself.
Yeah.
That's why vision boards, time alone, solitude are so important to me.
Yeah.
So important to me because it allows me to reflect on me. Because the reality is all the resources are within you, within each of us.
I say that all the time. It's like when I speak or I do the work that I do, I don't really do much like preparing, or I don't remember lines. Like I always tell people, like I'm just a messenger, and the words flow through me. But I know that it doesn't just come from anywhere. It comes from, well, first and foremost, my belief in God and my faith and trust in God to give me the words I need in that particular situation. But you mentioned earlier, like reading, and for me, my entire prison sentence, I read about a book a week, at least one book a week for 17 years, and it just transformed me, like everything. How important, I know you mentioned reading was huge for you to kind of, just find, I guess, visualize and reflect in other ways. Or even for me, sometimes it was an escape. Like I would read stuff and literally feel like I was there. So I kind of got addicted to that in a way, like that feeling, and I loved it. And how important was that for you? Why do you think reading and studying and learning was so important for you in that place to get through it mentally?
So many different reasons. One, reading took you to, it opened up doors that you didn't know could open, right? It broadened your horizons tremendously. Two, it allowed you to escape from the environment that you were in, right? From the prison hellhole, right? The concrete walls and the bars and the dark gray and the dark and the light green that's designed to dictate a particular mood. It allowed you to escape that, right? And you can read and be wherever you wanted to be, right? If you could just tap into that mind, tap into that source. You see, and at the same time, it allows you to grow. Because like I said, I would read autobiographies because in a way I was trying to live vicariously through, the people that I read about, the Miles Davises, the Barry Whites, the Quincy Jones, and the Malcolm X's, the Nelson Mandelas, right? The Viktor Frankls, the Immaculée Ilibagiza. Like you try to live vicariously through these people and see how they were able to transcend their lives, right? And reading has a way of taking you places that you may never go in life, but you've been there mentally. Right? And you can see, like, even our communication, I saw a connection. This guy is me. This guy is just on a different side of the world, but you and I are very similar.
Yeah, we are.
Right? And you can see that, and you can feel that, and it's like, wow, like he got it. You know what I mean? He got it. He saw something, he felt something, he internalized certain things, and he realized that at the end of the day, while we're here, we're vessels. It's up to you what type of vessel you want to be. Whether you want to be a vessel of honor or you want to be a vessel of dishonor. And I make a conscious decision to be a vessel of honor.
Yeah.
And I think you've done the same thing. And so that for me is, reading has allowed me to become and to develop and grow into a better vessel of honor. And I'm still becoming. I don't got it all figured out. I still make mistakes. I still fall short, right? I'm still learning how to communicate now, today, right?
Yeah.
Both in America as well as when I go to Africa with justice defenders. I'm learning a lot from justice defenders, right? Like how the cultural differences on the continent, in Uganda and Kenya, and just two different countries, maybe an hour apart, and the cultural differences between them, right? How you're greeted, how women greet you, how men greet you. It's completely different than the United States. Completely different.
Yeah.
Right? You go to Uganda and the women are madame. That's how you address every woman. And some of the women that you meet, that you may encounter, they may be what we call up here night walkers, right? But they're still madame. There's still a level of dignity and respect that they show. And they say, welcome home when you get off the plane. So it's just a different vibe, a different energy. And I just think that reading about Africa and then actually going there was an experience, man. Because one of my favorite books is Left to Tell. You may have heard me speak about it, but it's about the Rwanda genocide. It's the first book that really tore me up and brought me to tears, right? But it made me wonder and think how this little girl was able to make it. And that's really what I tapped into, her resilience and how she was able to transcend that bathroom that she was in for 91 days with 7 other women while their families were being slaughtered just right outside.
Yeah.
And I say to myself, if she can will herself to overcome that, then I can will myself to overcome this. I can will myself to be better, because we all have the potential to be better.
Yeah.
Right? You have to really want it.
Yeah.
You have to really want it. You have to really internalize and realize that, you have the potential to do it. We don't believe enough in ourselves.
Mm-hmm.
Right? And I think that for a long time in my earlier childhood, I didn't believe enough in myself. Right? Education came easy for me. I was always smart in school. But being smart and not having that strong belief in yourself, despite how my father would always stress the word ambition, and my mother would struggle and tell me to go to school and get your education. They would want us to do more. It took me a little while to really believe in me. But when I did, that's something that's indestructible. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
No one can take that from me. Not even the system that shaves my head, shaves my underarms, sprays me down, and labels me a number. They can't take that from me.
Yeah.
People can't define who you are. And we should never let people tell us who we are.
Yeah. What's one of the biggest challenges you've been facing since you've been out after doing all that time? You've been out 2 years. And I know I have a list of them for myself. I just interested in what you're kind of facing and dealing with.
I think, and I'm going to be completely transparent here, I think how we communicate, how people communicate here,
Mm-hmm.
and how they navigate professional workspaces, right? Today, if I say to Sally in the workplace, "It's a nice outfit you got on. You look nice today," that's considered sexual harassment. When I left the streets, that wasn't a thing. I spent 29 years in prison, right?
Yeah.
None of that was a thing, right? And I think you come into a world where the dynamics are different, and some people weaponize certain things that have changed.
Mm-hmm.
And it doesn't really matter what your intentions are. It matters how someone receives it. So for me, it's just navigating social settings, right? Also tech.
Yeah.
Tech is a little, I had a young lady teaching me some stuff, and a friend of mine, David Layton from Witty, from the metal group that I'm a part of, teaching me a bit of ChatGPT and AI. You go in, this is unheard of. Like ChatGPT is like a personal assistant.
Yeah.
So you put whatever into it, whatever prompts you put in, and it spits out what you want. I know a guy that actually had his resort built off of AI telling him what materials to use, how to design it, just everything.
Yeah.
Just everything, right? Through ChatGPT. So learning and navigating tech, navigating the social settings, right? Because sometimes, you can be a bit standoffish, especially coming out of prison. You can be a little bit isolated.
Yeah.
And people will read that the wrong way, right? Or if you're too open, people will read that the wrong way, right? Like even in prison, it was me and a guy named Andre Galloway. They would always say this too. They would always say, "Man, you guys got life bids. You guys always smiling." My man Andre Galloway he was like a magician, right? So he would do card tricks. He would do his levitating. This is every day. But he was also a professional fighter. Mm-hmm. And so him and I always got along very well. And I'm a morning person. Mm-hmm. Right? As you can see, that's what
me too.
I'm really a morning person, right? Like I wake up with a smile on my face because I'm grateful for another day. And that's where my gratitude comes in, right? So I embrace the challenges that come that day because everything happens for you, not to you, right? You're blessed to have that opportunity. You know what I mean? And so we would always smile, and I was in all maximum security prisons for 29 years. Yeah. So we're in Greenhaven, we're in Clinton, Dannemora, where violence is at an all-time high. And yet when we see each other, it's always a smile. And guys would really say, "Why you guys always smiling, man?" I mean, guys would literally say that, man. Mm-hmm. Guys, woke up they got rocks in their mouth, grit in their teeth.
Yeah.
You guys always smiling. This is the max. Don't let these police see you smiling. And I'm like, brother, why shouldn't I smile? My situation doesn't define who I am. I'm happy to be alive. Yeah, I got a life bid, but I ain't doing it. Right? And I had that mindset for years. Whatever it was that I knew that I wasn't going to do 37 and a half to life. But I had my struggles. It's not like I didn't have challenges.
Yeah.
But I didn't think that it was necessary for me to walk around angry every day.
Mm-hmm.
Because anger only consumes the vessel that carries it. It doesn't consume the other person. The correction officer's you're not going to spoil his day because you're angry.
Yeah.
Your stress level goes up. It affects your health and no one else's.
Mm-hmm.
So you got to do what's best for you. And I always have been a jovial person, have that spirit, and I think that's just a part of, that's like a superpower.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah, it is.
That was my superpower, I guess, and that was Andre Calloway's superpower. And we would always tell guys, we ain't letting these people get us like that.
Yeah.
We not letting them get us. People think, even including officers. You ever watch that study, the Stanford prison study?
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
You see when they took the students, and some of them became officers, and some of them became incarcerated people, and the way that the officers treated the people was horrible. And these were schoolmates,
Mm-hmm.
right? But they treated them in a certain way because they had internalized this idea that a correction officer was supposed to conduct themselves this way, and a prisoner or someone incarcerated should be treated this way, right? That is the farthest thing from the truth. That's the farthest thing from the truth. But we've been socialized into believing that. That's why you have in New York State, while I was on the train, I got it on Instagram, one of the officers just pled guilty to manslaughter for killing Robert Brooks. Right? I'm sure you're familiar with Robert Brooks that was killed in Marcy, New York State prison, a medium security.
Mm-hmm.
And then another young kid, I believe his name is Muhammad, that was killed in a prison across the street from Marcy.
Mm-hmm.
Right? And now those officers are being charged. But in their mind, we've been socialized into thinking that this is how you're supposed to be, a brute force.
Yeah.
Right? But the reality is, when you go into prisons in Uganda and Kenya, the officers, who many of them may very well be from the same tribe as those that are incarcerated, they treat them like regular, they have great conversations. Like they treat them so well. The conditions are deplorable because of the country itself and the lack of resources, right?
Yeah.
That is put into the system, and it's, British colonialism is a reminder of that and how these systems were developed, right? But the officers treat the incarcerated people in Uganda completely different than people are treated in the United States in prisons. I mean, they're kind. We bring stuff in for them. We go in there and we're interacting with them. They get along so well with the officers.
Oh.
It's unbelievable.
That's incredible.
It's unbelievable,
Yeah.
right? And it's like, despite them being inside, they still have a level of dignity, and people still treat them with that. Right? Unlike over here, we have this mindset that we should treat others as less than ourselves, and that shouldn't be the case.
Yeah.
Right? And when we go, Justice Defenders educates correction officers and prisoners in the law. Correction officers literally take the same courses as many of the incarcerated people through the University of London and earn law degrees and help other prisoners get out with their legal work. The officers do that right now in Uganda and Kenya through the Justice Defenders organization. So how is it that can happen over there? And we say that's the third world country. How is it that can happen over there? And why can't it happen here in in the United States?
I think a lot of it too is because, like, the United States uses prison as a business. It's the prison industrial complex. It's like we don't want people to get out because every person is more money.
Absolutely.
You know that, and so like the mindset is, first of all, they're less than us. And I always tell people, the hardest thing for me about prison wasn't about the food, the conditions, none of that. It was the way that I was treated,
Absolutely.
the way that I was looked at when I would be walking in cuffs to medical or something. and I would say, hey, how are you doing this morning? You know, how are you doing? And you would just be ignored or looked at like you're a piece of shit. Like that feeling over and over for years and years, it does something to your soul. And so I completely understand what you're saying. Like it's I would rather live in worse conditions and be treated like a human by the people there that really want to see me thrive and get out than live and have, you know, a 13-inch TV in my cell and be treated like crap every day by correctional guards. So it's like that's how strong that feeling is. But that's incredible. I didn't know that about the prisons out there.
Yeah, and that's deep, right? That's deep that you said how that triggered you and how that bothered you, because you just want to be treated as a human being, and you're opening that door. You're walking with an open heart.
Yeah.
Right? But you, as I said earlier, old timer told me when I got to Green Haven in 1996, he told me go into the law library, and he looked at me and he said, protect your soul, young man. I always see you going to the library. You're a good guy. He said, protect your soul. I didn't really know what he meant at that time, but I began to figure it out. And you're protecting your soul from that. From the dehumanizing treatment, right, that can cause a person to become bitter, right? You protect your soul from that so that you don't become bitter, that you become better, right? And you realize that that's not anything that you did. It's actually something that they did, right? It's something that they have to carry. Don't you carry that burden. Person, you say good morning, you say how you doing, and they want to treat you like less than human. That's the problem that they have to carry. Not Carlos, you ain't got to carry that.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? And until we understand that, we, you know, it'll have that triggering response from us. But we don't have to carry that. All we can do is be the best us and be open and be vessels of honor. That's it. And we walk through life trying to be a vessel of honor, right? How people respond to that, that's on them. But you still choose to be kind. You still choose to be loving. You still choose to be open. Right, when a guy asks you a question, yo, how can I get in school? These were every single day questions that I began to be asked. Right, same guys that didn't like me or that frowned upon me, that were gangbanging, would sometimes pull me to the side in the yard. Yo, what's up? Oh, G, can I talk to you? I said, what's up, man? Nah, I see you doing your thing. You going to school every night. You be over there studying. Yo, I'm trying to pull out, man. I'm trying to get into that.
Yeah.
How many times I've been asked that? And I say, yo, just come with me, man. I'll get you signed up. Call me, talk to me, give me your name and numbers. I'll bring it to the guy and put you on the call out, man.
Yeah.
You got your GED? Nah, I ain't got it yet, man. Yo, you can help? All right, I'm going to get somebody that can help tutor you with math, because I'm not the best at math. When it come down to reading and writing, I can do that for you.
Yeah.
Right? I mean, knocks I got on my wall. A guy said, yo, can I talk to you? What's up? Yo, could you write a letter for me?
Yeah.
Right? I had to write a letter about 17 letters for one guy, because during COVID, which was the worst part of my life and my entire life, right? During COVID and being shackled to go see my father when he passed away. Probably the most difficult day of my life, right? Being shackled around the waist, around my arms and around my ankles, and then going in. I remember getting off the bus, the first person that saw me was my nephew. And he said, Uncle. And I got out the van, and then I had to go inside and see my father in a coffin, shackled like this, and all my family around, right? Even in that, I had to muster up the resolve and the resilience to stand tall, right? And to say, I'm here to see I'm here to see Daddy, right? You can't ignore the chains, right? You can't ignore the officers standing there, but it's very hurtful for me, very crushing moment for me.
Yeah.
You know, really crushing moment. And then COVID, you got guys telling you, yo, man, my mother, my sister just found her laying in her waist. I lost my father already to COVID. Now my mom's, yo, can you write to see if I can get a bedside visit? And I would do everything I can over and over again. I watched guys' lives were just disrupted during that COVID-19. And no one thought about that. You had people in society saying, oh, we feel like we're in prison, we can't go out. I was sitting out, watch the TV, and that's one thing that would get me so angry. And I would say, these people have no clue. You in society and you stuck in your home. They saying stay home. And you saying you feel like you're in prison. You can't imagine what the guy that's in prison and in the box in isolation feeling right now. I know guys that caught COVID and they said, all right, we have nowhere to put you. We're putting you in the box. So you were penalized for getting sick.
Yeah.
But mainstream America didn't know that. And if they did know, many of them probably wouldn't care. But the world didn't know that's what we were going through. If the world saw what we went through during COVID, I wish there was a secret camera to watch every cell in prison during the COVID-19 pandemic. I really, really wish there was, because I think society would shift from its mindset of punishment, right, to really talk about rehabilitating it, because the challenges and the pain that men went through, and I'm sure women as well that were incarcerated, was insurmountable. It was just unbelievable.
Yeah.
Unbelievable. And getting sick. I watch guys get taken out in hazmat suits. Oh, he got it. He's on the gallery. They come with hazmat suits. You watching through with your mirror to see what cell they go to. They stop at a cell. They take the guy out. And you're like, oh, man, he got it. Yo, and it's like, I was just talking to him. We were just in the clinic together talking. Wow, he got it? Yeah, they got the whole suits on. They bringing him out with the officers, and everybody got on masks. Then you don't see him. Then you hear 16 days later, literally, I would count the days, you hear them say, yo, he's dead. He was on the ventilator, and he died. And it's like, this guy was just 5 cells down from me. I saw him every day. And there's no bereavement counseling in prison.
Right.
No one came to me and said, do you need counseling after your father passed away and you had to endure that? No one came to my neighbor after his mother and his entire family died from COVID and said, do you need some counseling? Do you need some therapy? Do you need some help? No one said that. All we had was each other.
Yeah.
Right? I've watched men, fall into deep, deep substance abuse addiction, start smoking K2, like losing their mind.
Yeah.
Because, this COVID thing had them rocked, and so many family members lost. My brother died. He had asthma. He caught COVID. He's dead. My sister works in the hospital. She got it. She's on the ventilator. You hear these stories over and over and over again. Over and over again.
Yeah.
Right? Especially on those long galleries in Sing Sing. That's where I was when COVID came out. Right? I was actually going to journalism school with the guy that used to be the head of the New York Times, Weber. He was coming and teaching journalism. He's about 80-something years old. He's still around. And he said to us one day, he says, I don't think I'm going to be coming in because some stuff is going on the outside. So I don't think I'll be coming in. And I said, well, what are you talking about? He said, I don't think I'll be coming in. I remember it like it's yesterday, because that same year, February 7th, 2020 is when I gave my TEDx talk. March is when COVID hit hard, and they start saying, we were making masks on our own. And they said, you can't wear masks. Then they demanded masks. Then the prison started giving out cloth masks. And you just hearing about death after death after death. Guys' cells are opening. You got to go see a counselor. And guys are like, oh my God, I wonder what this is. What a chaplain, in prison, the angel of death, what people don't know is the chaplain, right? Whether it's, I'm sure you're familiar with this. The angel of death is either the Catholic priest, the Protestant chaplain, or the Jewish rabbi, or the imam. Because when you see them in the block making their rounds on the gallery, 9 times out of 10, they go into somebody's cell to say, you just had a death in your family.
Yeah.
Right? We want to take you down to my office so you can call your family. You know what I mean? Because that's how they're supposed to take you out. They're not supposed to leave you in the cell, unlike what they did to me, right? They left me in the cell and just said, yo, I got a call from your sister. Your father died. I'll see you later, see if I can get you on the phone. The walls begin to close in on me, right? And the imam said, man, that guy did everything wrong. He didn't know how you would respond. Let me take over, right? Let me take over the process and get you down there to see your family. But this was happening literally during COVID 2, 3, 4 times every single day. And everybody's on high alert, right? Hyper vigilant, like with their mirrors out. Yo, who's that? That's the priest? Yeah, the priest is walking. damn, what's Sully stopping at, man? I don't know, but he's still coming this way. And everybody's like, oh, my God, I hope he doesn't stop here.
Yeah. Some people who the only support and people they had left in their corner were passing.
Absolutely.
I remember one of my friends lost like both of his parents, his aunt, like everybody that was there for him through his bid, his struggle was gone. And he came out and like he, you know, didn't really show any emotions, but you can feel it. And it's just like, you know, how do you know, you're there to support them, you're there to be there for them. But like you said, there was nobody there to really like help people in prison who were dealing with those losses, you know, like
no one. I got a young Italian friend named Robert Maffei. His brother Chris is a good friend of mine. He's the guy I was telling you about that used AI to help him design his resort in Tulum, right? Bobby he lost both his parents during COVID.
yeah.
Right? Nice kid. Good kid. Young guy. Lost his parents.
Yeah.
Right? There is no intervention, right? No one says, let me provide some type of
Yeah.
mental health, some type of counseling to guys going through that level of despair.
Yeah.
You know?
Who are some of the people in your life that never gave up on you through your whole bid? And
my mother, my sister, my brothers, you know, some of my friends, you know, my friend Rich and my friend Shamel, like different guys that I knew that I grew up with, and family members. More than anything, my mother and my sister, right? I had 2 sisters that always try to be there for me, and 4 brothers. And brothers are good, but there's something about having sisters, you know? But my mother, you know, and I just thank God that I was able to come home and be there for her.
Yeah. What would you tell your father today if you had the opportunity?
I would tell him that I'm doing my best to do what he asked me to do. And I know I can do better. I think there's always room for improvement.
Yeah.
I'm one of the guys that always, no matter what happens in my life, whether people say I'm at fault or not, I always take a look at me.
Yeah.
And see how did I contribute to this situation.
Yeah.
Right? What is it about me? What is it about my energy? What is it about my conversation? What is it about my walk, my talk, or about myself that contributed to this situation? So I'm always reflecting on me. And so I would tell my father, thank you. I would express my gratitude to him for what he's poured into me, what he's poured into his family. And I would just tell him I'm doing my best. And if he can possibly continue to help from where he is and be some kind of guide to kind of help me with the choices and decisions that I make. Because he's always needed.
Yeah.
You know.
Before we go, how can people reach you or follow you, support you, and a last message to whoever out there is listening to you?
I think for me it's really I think everyone needs to understand that incarcerated people globally, they need us, right? Our people that are in prison are better than the worst thing they've ever done. They're more than the worst thing they've ever done. And I think that the incarcerated people have redeeming value. And we need to understand that that redeeming value is talented, it's gifted, they have a human soul, we can tap into it. And let's try to help people get better, right? Let's try to help people get better. And sometimes it's just the love that you get that can make a guy say, damn, you know, I want to do better, man. You know, Carlos been supporting me, he been believing in me. Sometimes believing in someone, believing in your loved one, right? In some way, shape, or form, can help them become better. You know, can help them make better decisions. As far as my personal life, you know, I just got on TikTok. You know,
Nice.
Bruce.Bryan 24, and I'm on Instagram, the same thing, Bruce Bryan, Bryan. But also Justice Defenders and the work that we're doing in Uganda and Kenya. You know, please follow Justice Defenders. Look at what we're doing. See how you can be a part of what we're doing, right? Because people are out there that have something to give, right? Whether it's your time, your wisdom, your understanding, your knowledge, right? Whatever it is that you can give, please see what Justice Defenders is doing and how we're literally going into the prisons and the difference that they're making. When I tell you the founder, Alexander McLean, is my brother, he's an extraordinary human being. And I think to have him on your show, to meet him, you'll probably feel, I'm sure you'll feel the same way.
Yeah.
And the work, you know how important education is in prison, man.
Yeah.
People don't like us to get educated. You know, up here in New York State, at one point they said, well, free education in prison. What my kid has to do, go to jail to get an education? But what do you want, right? 90% of the people that are incarcerated are coming home. Would you rather your next door neighbor come home with an education? Because we know two things. People age out of crime and they educate out of crime. That's just a fact. Right? The 99.9% of the people that have earned bachelor's and master's degrees while they were incarcerated never come back to prison.
Yeah.
Right? Because education has broadened the scope of their knowledge. It has broadened their eyes. It has given them purpose and self-worth. Right? It has caused them to believe in themselves more. Right? And bringing education and bringing legal education into prisons in Uganda and Kenya, which is what Justice Defenders does, is changing the entire prison environment. What we call superintendents, they call officers in charge. I have a few videos of me talking to a couple of officers in charge. And the officers in charge are saying, please, Justice Defenders, keep coming. We love what you're doing, because this prison was built for 600 people, and now we have 2,800. So the more legal knowledge you bring in, the more we can get some of them out. Because they don't belong in here. They don't deserve to be in here. I know a guy named Morris that was sentenced to death for stealing a cell phone. He was an ex-cop. If you watch 60 Minutes with Justice Defenders, Morris was literally he was a police officer who stole a cell phone, which he said was his own cell phone, and didn't take a bribe, was charged with stealing a cell phone and bribery. He laid up in jail for 8 years, was convicted and sentenced to death, resided on death row for 5 years. He did 13 years in total before he was released. This guy was on death row for stealing a phone, man. Now you talk about draconian, you talk about absurd. That's outrageous, man. I'm not sure you even get arrested for stealing a cell phone. This guy was sentenced to death. And it was through legal education that Justice Defenders brought in that transformed his life and got his case overturned. He himself and others. Have I ever showed the 60 Minutes version to you of that?
No, I'm going to look it up, and I'll put it in the
notes
as well.
Please, some of the stuff people might hear and say, this guy's just talking.
Yeah.
But I implore your listeners to go look it up.
Absolutely.
And, and you'll see.
Yeah.
Anderson Cooper special, 60 Minutes, the type of time that they're giving out. These are human lives. We can't have our brothers and sisters languishing behind prison bars.
Yeah.
When I was just in Uganda, I was speaking at Luzira Women's Prison. While I was literally speaking to women who were sitting on the floor, I was in the nursery part where 50 babies were born in prison, where they reside in prison for 2 to 3 years until a family member comes and gets them, or they go into the system, right? And during me presenting to these young women, another young incarcerated woman went into labor right there. And they essentially just had to take her in the back with the doctor and were delivering her baby while we were out there speaking and sharing with the incarcerated women.
I mean, it's obvious that things need to change, and I'm grateful that me and you could be out here to help contribute to that. And we're not the only ones, so if you're out there listening and you can help in any way, please reach out to us, and especially to you. And I know I really truly appreciate this time, Bruce, and thank you so much for being here today. And
thank you.
And we'll come back and let's do it again.
Absolutely, it's an honor, and I just want you to know that your voice matters.
Thank you.
And you're making a difference, man.
Yeah, appreciate that. God bless you, man. Thank you.
God bless you. Thanks, man.
Yeah.